Mm. If if by any chance you are like me, there are questions that you have that are confusing, right? Which all of us do. So I saw a video title by multiple different. I think these people were all believers, right? Believers in the channels, and the headline says something like I have for this one: 70 Christians unalived. They didn't say unalived. They would say how they were unalived. Be head dead. All right, you got to spell it out. You know what I'm saying? So it'd be like, and no media. And I was blown away by this. I saw multiple believers posting this story, and I was blown away by, it would say 70 Christians unalived, but they would say how? Be head dead, right? Unalived and no media. And I was blown away by this. So let me make sure, if you're watching, first things first, welcome to CNN. I'm the underdog, your host, Kirk Kennedy. Let's go in. On this channel, we take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. All right. So let's watch a quick video of covering the event. This is what people were talking about, and I thought this was pretty crazy. All right. So let's watch this for a second, and then we'll get into what I was surprised about.
Earlier this month came a shocker. 70 Christians were beheaded with machetes by members of the Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF, an Islamic State-linked group. The attackers had rounded up victims and executed them inside a church in Kasanga in North Kivu province. After the attack, many Christians fled the region seeking safety. In fact, tens of thousands of residents of eastern DRC are fleeing to neighboring countries. Starting February, 40,000 Congolese nationals, mostly women and children, have arrived in Burundi. Their only hope: survival under international protection.
The other day we had...
All right, so that's the main headline that I've seen. So 70 Christians. So basically, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, Muslims have been targeting Christians, and they basically took 100 Christians, made them walk a considerable amount. They went inside this church, and then inside the church, 70 of them were tortured and then unalived by, with a machete, cutting off the cranium, their heads, right? So this is the story. And then many believers covered this story, and they all have the same thing that I have, and no media. Where is the media? I was blown away by this. I was blown away by seeing this, all of it. But I wasn't blown away at what you see on your screen. That's not why I was blown away. I was actually blown away by the second half of the title of this video, and what some of the other people, like, what do you mean? And some people who, I love their content, make good content. I was surprised that they mentioned that the media is silent about that, about the 70 Christians who were just unalived in the DRC. And I was surprised by the silence of the media, not because the media is silent. I was surprised that believers are surprised that the media is silent. So as I watched I watched like 3 videos, all these guys, big subscribers, big YouTube channels. As I watched them show a little clip, like something like I did, and then talk about the media being silent, and then saying, you know, if this were Islamic, they would have said this. And then one they showed last year, there was in the UK, some guy, basically it was a national story about something happening to this one guy. I think he was a Muslim or something. It was a world story, and they talked about, but with the Christians, the media is silent, and they're saying all these things. And as I watched believers, and I see this all the time, and I say these things all the time. I think sometimes you have to say things 5 times for people to hear it once, but the reality is, here's the question that as I was watching the video, and these guys did a great job, the ones that I saw, of explaining what happened in Congo, 70 Christians unalived, and the media says nothing about it. Here's the question that I said to myself, and I just thought, wow, and I was talking to a buddy last night, and I just thought, the media is silent when suffering happens to Christians. And here was the question I asked after that. Should they not be? So here's what I was surprised by. I wasn't surprised that 70 believers in the DRC in Congo lost their lives. I wasn't surprised by that. I was surprised that believers, mostly in America, I did see one in the UK. I watched a video where there was a guy in the UK who basically was surprised that media was silent about the suffering happening to Christians. And some were even outraged that, if you did this to Muslims, or they were naming these different groups of people, if they had done this to them, it would have been a world story and all of it when it happens to Christians and all this stuff. And I just, people may be offended at my outlook on these things. I try to, as best as I can, to be biblical. But the media is silent, and my question is, should they not be? And let me give you just real quick. This is, again, you don't have to agree, but this is where, let me give you this is where my mind goes when stuff like this happens. I'm more surprised that believers with big platforms are surprised that the media is not covering the suffering and the unaliving of other Christians. Let me tell you why. There's 2 passages that this is not what the passages are saying. So when the Bible, there's always context. What's the context that the passage was written in? What was it talking about? What's it addressing? But then there's context, and then there's sort of an application of it. I'm going to use it as a principle. So here's the context. This is what it meant, but here's a principle. And let me show you this in this particular passage. Let me look at 2 of them. Here's the first one. All right. 2 Corinthians 4, it says this. Paul is writing to the church in Corinth, and he says this: "Therefore, having this ministry by the mercy of God, we do not lose heart, but we have renounced disgraceful, underhanded ways. We refuse to practice cunning or tamper with God's words." Amen. "But by the open statement of the truth, we would commend ourselves to everyone's conscience in the sight of God. And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing." Verse 4, "In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God." All right. So let's look at this sort of contextually. Paul is saying that he and the people that are with him are doing ministry, and they refuse to be disgraceful or tamper with God's word, all of it, and saying, listen, we submit our conscience to you all. Right? We commend ourselves to everyone's conscience in the sight of God. We're not going to, that's what he's saying. We're living above reproach, right? And then he says this: "And even if our gospel is veiled," if people don't believe the gospel that he's teaching, he's saying it's veiled to people who are perishing, people who are not going to make it to eternity with God. And then he says this in verse 4: "In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God." So in other words, it's the God of this world, Satan, is keeping these people, is veiling the gospel that Paul and them are teaching, and keeping people from seeing the light of the glory of Christ, right? The light of the gospel, believing in Jesus. The God of this world is keeping people. So this is what Paul is talking about. He's saying, when we preach the gospel, we're going to do it without tampering with God's word, all of it. But we understand that the God of this world is stopping people from believing the gospel, right? That's contextually. Now let's think of this principally to the point that I'm making. Here's the thing that I think we have to be careful of as believers. What I think we have to stop doing. This is just my thought. You feel free to disagree. In verse 4, it says this: in their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory. So it's calling Satan the God of this world, right? That's one of the names that Satan is given. And it makes sense because in Luke 4 and Matthew 4, when Satan was tempting Jesus, at one point he said, he took Jesus high up on a mountain and he offered to Jesus, said, look, I'll give you, it said that he showed Jesus all the kingdoms in the world at a moment's time, all right? Then he said, these have been given to me, I can give them to whoever I want, right? So this is a true statement. Paul is speaking that Satan is the God of this world for that reason. Let's not even talk about the fact that Satan was given sort of an omnipresent power just to tempt Jesus. Satan is not omnipresent and cannot show you all the kingdoms of the world in a moment's time unless he was given that authority just so that he could tempt Jesus. We're not even talking about that. But here's the reality. Satan's the God of this world, and he's blinded the minds of unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel. If that's true for their salvation, why would Satan not also blind them from seeing the light of the gospel and the glory of Christ in other people? Like, why would Satan, the God of this world, why would he want to show that Christians are suffering and losing their lives, allowing people to have sympathy for them and rallying other believers across the world to be praying for them? This is what I get that, like, I don't know. I guess it's probably me. I don't expect the world in most senses to care about what happens to the church. I do not. I do not think that Satan is God of this world, and he's blinding the minds of unbelievers. Most of the media are unbelievers. Doesn't matter what country, they're mostly unbelievers. Legacy media, whatever, they're unbelievers, the vast majority. And why would Satan want them to promote stories that happen to the suffering of believers so that people will be sympathetic towards them? I do not believe that is ever going to happen, right? I do not believe it's ever going to happen. And let me tell you, there's another reason why I don't believe it, and it's something that Jesus taught. Here's what Jesus said. This is Matthew 12, right? This is when they accused Jesus of, well, listen to this. So there's contextually and then there's principally. So we'll read it contextually, then I'm going to give you a principle of why we should not be surprised that media is silent at the suffering of believers, all right? Here's what it says. And the demon-oppressed man was blind and mute and was brought to him, and he healed him so that the man spoke and saw. And all the people were amazed. Can this be the son of David? But when the Pharisees heard it, they said, it is only by Beelzebub, the prince of demons, that this man casts out demons. Knowing their thoughts, he, being Jesus, said to them, every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and no city or house divided against itself will stand. And if Satan casts out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand? Contextually, Jesus is making the point that the Pharisees, these people, are saying that he's casting out demons by the power of Satan. And his point is, fam, why would Satan do that? Because a house divided against itself cannot stand. If I'm casting out demons by the power, I'm casting out those who worship Satan by the power of Satan, that doesn't make any sense. That's the point he's making. That doesn't make any sense. A kingdom divided against itself can't stand it. And if Satan has cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. He's not going to do it. That's the context of what Jesus is saying. I'm not doing this by the power of Satan. That would be stupid for Satan to cast his own self out by his own power. That's dumb. This is what Jesus is saying. Contextually. Now let's think about this principally. If you're a believer and you fundamentally believe that Christianity is the only way, that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light, right? No one comes to the Father but through him, right? There's no other name besides. If you fundamentally believe that, which I do believe that, then everything else that claims to be, that claims to have any faith, religion, eternity is of the devil, right? Remember, we just saw 2 Corinthians 4, Satan is God of this world, blinds the minds of unbelievers, right? In Luke 4, he presents to Jesus all the kingdoms of the world. Why would Satan attack other religions the same way he attacks Christianity? Why would he do that? He wouldn't do, because if he knows Christianity is the true faith and everyone else already belongs to him, why would he attack anyone else? Why would he? Of course he's going to elevate what happens to other faiths because he wants to draw attention to those. And he's going to minimize what happens to believers. I'm saying this because we all watch a lot of these YouTube influencers. We respect them. They do good work. But sometimes I feel like biblical illiteracy is not just like, I don't know where the Bible is or what I mean. Sometimes it's just like we forget, like, what does the Bible actually teach? Jesus made it clear that if the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. No servant is greater than his master. The world does not love Jesus. They love the Jesus of the pictures, not the Jesus of the scriptures. They love the Jesus that's really attractive, that has a nice looking beard and all of that with blue eyes and brown. They don't love the Jesus of the scriptures that said no beauty or majesty that he had that we would be drawn to him. So like, we should not be surprised that media is silent or that people are not wanting us to, we have to stop thinking that our faith is constitutional and we have a right to practice our faith is Christological. Like Jesus said, they're going to hate you if they hate me. And they're going to hate you because you're not of this world. I appreciate when the apostles were beaten because they were preaching Christ and they counted it as honor, as a privilege to be beaten because they were persecuted for believing in Jesus. And now in America, we're so offended. We're just offended at the thought of persecution, as if 2 Timothy 3:12 doesn't say, indeed, all who desire to live with God in life will be persecuted. The media will often be silent. They don't care because Satan is God of this world and he blinds the minds of unbelievers. We should not be disappointed, outraged, or shocked when they don't show us love because we're not supposed to get it from them. Maybe it's me, though. I don't know. Maybe it's me.